Mitra Phukan on my right, and I'm Jahnavi Barua here. Today's book, which Sanjoy has written after 30 years, 25 years after his last book, which was called Strict.
Ladies and gentlemen, may we please give our speakers some respect. May we please be quiet so that they can be heard. They have some views to present which we have come to hear, and we'd like to be able to hear them. Please settle down, ladies and gentlemen. If you have to leave, then please leave, otherwise please sit down. If there are people who need to leave, would you please do so while we take this short 1-minute break? And then now can we proceed in silence, please? That's my request to you. Thank you.
Welcome to this session. We're discussing Sanjoy Hazarika's book, Strangers No More. To my right is Mitra Phukan, writer from Assam, and Sanjoy Da to my left, and I'm Jahnavi Barua. Sanjoy's book, Strangers No More, comes 25 years after his last book, which was Strangers of the Mist. And it somehow, the very title, Strangers No More, resonated with me very strongly, because to a large part of the Indian population, to a large portion of the country, the Northeast is an area shrouded in mist. It's this misty, nebulous region which very little is known about. And growing up 25, 30, 35 years ago, it was shrouded in an even more dense mist than it is today. And what I find today is that mist is lifting. And I've been living in Bangalore for the last 26 years, and I find I am not such a stranger anymore. So when I found this book saying Strangers No More, I kind of thrilled to it. So I'm going to start with the title and talk to Sanjoy and Mitra and see what they have to say about are we less strange than before to each other? Sanjoy, will you start commenting on this?
Thanks, Jahnavi, and good to have Mitra, old friend, on the panel. I just want to say it's great to be in Kasauli. I'm glad the weather is so bracing. I'm from Shillong, and the forest is 7 minutes from my home. So it's wonderful to be here. And the road from Kolkata to Kasauli reminded me of bad roads in the Northeast. So I feel very much at home. But strangers no more. So we are not a stranger to bad roads, whether they're in Kasauli or in Mizoram. But the title actually talks about the change which is coming, which is slow, but it's become visible. Which is that people are engaging with the idea of India when a generation before their parents would have fought against the idea of India. That to me was really quite visible in the students that I saw, the teachers, the professionals, the lawyers, writers. You know, there's a whole generation of people who've come out of the Northeast who are working, living, aspiring, and trying to do things. I mean, the idea is that we are not strangers to Delhi. We know how to handle Delhi. Delhi still may not know how to handle us. And as some of you have served in Delhi and in the Northeast. But I think the real problem, the challenge, as we were talking earlier, is that we are in the Northeast, perhaps strangers to each other. And that is probably the real challenge of what we have to deal with today. It's not about how Indian you were or how mainstream you become, because I hate the word mainstream anyway. There's nothing called a mainstream. There is only, like you say, a mainstream media. There's only metro media. And mainstream, the Brahmaputra is the biggest river of all of India, it carries more water than all the rivers of India together. So the mainstream is over there. You're all tributaries. So, that's how I look at it. I try and turn it on its head a bit.
What do you feel, Mitra? You've lived in the Northeast, and you still live there, in the thick of the fog, the mist, as it were. How do you feel about this?
Yes, again, I'd like to begin by saying it's lovely to be here. Weather is beautiful. Thank you. To get to this question, yes, I think this is actually a very balanced panel because she lives outside, I live within the region, And Sanjoy comes and goes. So it is like that. And it's like that for a lot of us now, because whenever I go out of the region, I find many people who are now saying that, I lived in Assam, I lived in Nagaland, Meghalaya, firstly because of the army, their father was in the army maybe, then secondly because of the tea, and thirdly because of oil, the things we have. Now because of tourism, which is wonderful as well. So these are the bridges which are helping us to be strangers no more. I met a lady who was in the civil services, and she says, I served there, I was there for my probation. So these are all wonderful things which are building bridges. When you wrote your that book, of course you've written several other books in between, but this book, Strangers No More, Strangers of the Mist, became a kind of a instant classic because it shed a lot of light on a region that really was shrouded in mist. Literally as well as metaphorically. Strangers No More is something I feel we are perhaps, we are also referred to as the periphery, which is also very insulting and so on. It's not something we don't think of ourselves as periphery. Nobody thinks of themselves as periphery. But now I find that the understanding from the rest of the country is gradually coming. But of the 8 states, 7 states that understanding is still fractious. It is not coming so much. Why is it that we can engage with the idea of India, but not so much with the idea of this region within which we live, which we are coming from? So in this book, I find that Sanjoy has done something very marvelous. He has taken the absolute details of what's going on there, but he never loses sight of the greater picture. That, that arc is always there, coming from the details to the greater picture, coming back through anecdotes, to descriptions, and so on. And I find that this question of are we still strangers to each other has been addressed time and again. And through all this conflict that he has been reporting, he has been talking about, I have come to the belief that we are understanding other people in the country more than perhaps we are understanding each other. Just this morning, we got the news that there's been a bomb blast in a very busy part of Guwahati, where I come from. So the idea of strangers, this idea of violence, is still endemic to the region, which is what we will perhaps talk about now.
So why do you think that happens? Why, despite moving forward, the fog lifting a bit, us knowing each other more, the Mekhela being popular in various metros in India. I live in Bangalore, I've been there for 26 years now, and a big thing I carry back to Bangalore when I go home is Mekhelas for all my friends. So now we have to ring each other up and say, don't wear that Mekhela at that party, because there's so many Mekhelas floating around Bangalore. Our food. I had a call from a newspaper, the Mint paper in Bombay. I was on holiday in Coorg, and they said, can you give us your favorite recipe? I don't cook that much, so I lent on the Assamese classic, tenga, fish tenga, and the man said, sorry, that's too common, give us something else. So I gave them O tenga, which is the elephant apple tenga. It's a specialized form of tenga. So if my food's becoming too common in India, then we're strangers no more, surely. But why then? Is something still holding us back? Does the past still intrude? Talking about violence between the factions in the Northeast. Why has the Northeast not been able to understand itself from within?
And this is a very complex issue because it is a complex area. We are all complex individuals with many lives. I think one of the challenges, if I can call it, is that you have something like 220 ethnic groups. There is no other part of Asia, perhaps, which has got, it's 220 and counting. They're still finding new groups and new languages. Where so many people are put together in a region that is lumped as the Northeast. I mean, it's not a phrase I particularly like, It's only 46 years old. It was started in 1972, that phrase, the Northeastern region. And I think the fact that people, as Mitra was saying, are very individual. You know, communities, the Nagas see themselves not just as Nagas, but as Lothas, Angamis, Chakisangs, Tangkhus. The Manipuris are not just Manipuris, there are Meiteis, there are Kukis. And I think this has become sharper and sharper. And then, in a way, the burden of history, lines were drawn which made no sense. People found themselves locked into spaces which were not, you know, in a way, what they were used to. They were used to, say, walking across borders like into what is now Myanmar, the Kukis and the Chins. I mean, they're all connected. And I think a lot of that has to do with that past, with that rewriting of history, in a way, in 47, and we've been doing a bit of it in our own way. You know, this, I think, and the other thing which I think is a problem is this attempt to manufacture consent. You know, you try and come to a deal. You try and create a deal with a certain group of people who are said to be leading a movement or an agitation or an insurgency, while forgetting there are a lot of other people who are shut out of this process. And I think these are at least some of the strands that I see which make it complicated. But when they go out of the region, they discover each other. I mean, I'll just tell you a very short story. I was going for a walk in Goa early in the morning, and I come across two people talking to each other across the road. They're speaking in Nepali. Okay? They're shouting to each other in Nepali. I walk a bit further, and there are three guards, before some resort. There were from three different ethnic groups which are at virtual conflict with each other at home. But here they were working together. So you rediscover yourselves and the humanity of the other person in a way when you're a bit distant, perhaps, from the velocity of the violence that burdens you, perhaps, or the community.
True, you find ties that bind instead of divisions when you're out. Mitra, you mentioned this morning, we were chatting, and you said, yes, we've come a long way, strangers no more, but some issues still seem to dog us. Some of the things Sanjoy wrote about in the first book, we are still writing about, playing out even today. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I always think when I read the local newspapers in Guwahati where I stay, often you can take a paper from 1980 or 1975 and open it, and if you don't look at the page, the same things. Illegal immigration, floods, and so on. You just change the date. So why is it that we are not being able to come out of that violence, bomb blasts, and so on? And actually we may say that these are stereotypes, but there's a reason why they have become stereotypes, and we are not able to come out. But the good thing I find is that with this coming next generation, young people, as you said, this out migration, going out, that is creating a different narrative, I feel now. Now we are no longer, at some level, talking just of, bomb blast and how many dead and so on, which is, well, of course it's happening all the time, but we are also just the previous panel, how to recycle waste and so on. We are not even talking of that, and we need it so badly where we come from. We are concerned, no doubt, but that's not something you hear on stage so much. So these are things I find that I feel sometimes, the stranglehold of history is too strong sometimes, and we are not able to get out of it. But now with technology, with young people moving out, other people coming in for tourism, but also bringing in, a freshness kind of a thing, new hotels, resorts, and so on coming out, we are engaging with ideas outside that, that history stranglehold that we have. So one should never forget one's history, but one should also never remain in the past. We should try to move on and see what is best, what we can learn from our lessons, and move on and apply those in a positive way to the future. That is what I feel, Jahnavi.
Well said. To look to the future, leave the past behind. But one thing from the past still dogs us, Sanjay da. Illegal migration, the list, NRC. What do you say about it? You've written a lot in the book.
Well, I think we'll do this in two ways. One, we'll talk about migration and illegal migration, then we should talk about the NRC, because everybody would have heard about the NRC, may not know in detail. But the issue of migration has been many years old. It's not 10 years old, 20 years old. It was an election issue in 1946 when the Congress party won that election, pre-independence, on the basis of migration from what was then East Bengal. You know, it wanted to stop that because it was seeing a change in the demographic pattern. But even if you go back in time, to the time of the invasion, we were always the other. It's not you who are the other, we were always the other. So when the Mughal invasions took place, there was the Shahabuddin Talish who said, its skies are not our skies, its people are not our people. Then there was a complaint from one of the generals, these people they don't fight like soldiers, they attack us at night, they ambush us. So those of you who are in the army, have served in the army, that's where guerrilla tactics began several years, 100 years ago, 400 years ago. So Ulfa and all these characters have learned something from the past. But coming to the present, illegal migration has been a major problem. There is no question about it. There has been a movement for many years. And it started in 79, it's still on and off continuing. And the problem is nobody seems to know how many people have come. So all these numbers floating around. And then came to cut a long story short, came the National Register of Citizens exercise, which was to define the number of Indians who were here in the state of Assam and the number of non-Indians, shall we say, or foreigners, whether they were Bangladeshis or otherwise. Now, it's come up, as you know, with a figure of 40 lakhs of people who haven't made the cut. The people who haven't made the cut include relatives of mine. I mean, Mitra, I think if you tell your story, that will have some resonance.
Yes, we are still at the draft stage, but
all going to be draft citizens.
Maybe. So the first, for some reason, the draft also came out in parts. We're creating a lot of panic because why is it that my name is not on this draft? So I found, to my shock and horror, I was there, but my sons were not there, and my one daughter-in-law was there and one daughter-in-law was not there. So I began to do, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And in all this, the best response I got was from a friend in Bangladesh who said, Bangladesh is always happy to take illegal migrants from Assam. So I said, okay, yes. Then, I was talking about it at every forum, that why is it that, and if obviously we can prove our ethnicity and so on at a later date, but if I am feeling so insecure being a Phukan, which is absolutely an Assamese name, if I am feeling so insecure, what about those who are citizens of India but who do not have this confidence that I can? How will they feel about it? And at that point there was suicides, there was a lot of anguish, and because many people, because of illiteracy, and you don't know, and there's a lot of fake news, what's going to happen, you will be pushed off, and nobody will even listen to what you're saying. So that, and of course in the second draft, the names have come in of my family, but the lady who looks after us all and is in charge of the kitchen, her name is not there now. So I really don't know how we're going to go forward on this, because her ancestral home is near the borders in Bongaigaon. So that is the kind of confusion that is, and of course you can appeal, you can ask to get your name, but I, being an educated person, I am not very sure how to go about it. How do these people manage? So it's created a lot of worries, it's created a lot of confusion, and no doubt illegal people, they have no place in a society, in a country. Citizens are there, they are there, some visa system or whatever, which you can talk about later, has to be there, but they have to be identified. But how and in what way, and without causing these inhuman things that are happening all around, I think we have to find a way forward on that.
See, I think that, to put it very clearly, there are, let's say, about 1.5 million Bangladeshis in Assam. I think it's about 1.5 to 2 million. The question is, we've been agitating since 79, it's 40 years. The narrative has not changed. Detect, delete, deport. Detect on the electoral rolls, delete from the electoral rolls, deport them. Your problem is, where are you going to deport them to? Nobody's thought about that, because Bangladesh, the Prime Minister's advisor of Bangladesh has said that Mr. Modi has assured the Prime Minister of Bangladesh that nobody is going to be pushed back. This is about a week ago, okay? Now, if nobody is going to be pushed back, then what is the fuss all about? You're not going to be able to push them away. You can't throw 15 lakh people into detention camps. You don't have the capacity, and it's an atrocious thing to think of tearing families apart. It's what we did, frankly, for those of you who served in Mizoram, it's what happened in 1966 to 69. We did it to our own people. We tore them apart from their families. We burned their villages. We destroyed their grains. And then we set up what was called regrouped villages. Hundreds of them. Out of the 280,000 population of Mizoram, 220,000 were forced from their homes and put into regrouped villages. That was the policy of the government of India, which was implemented by the security forces. And I think that we have a bad history of this, and we should not go that way. Already there are something like 2,000 people of doubtful origin, doubtful voters, who have been sitting in jails for anything between 5 to 15 years without even access to a lawyer. You know, they are not proven as Bangladeshis. And in the history of the 35 years that we've had a law on illegal migrants and tribunals, we have found 5,500 foreigners in 35 years, and few than that number have been deported. Okay? So we have a structural problem here. So detention and deportation are out. The third option is you defranchise them. Now you can defranchise people for 10 years, 5 years. You cannot defranchise them in perpetuity. That's a large number of people. The fourth option is to really negotiate hard with Bangladesh on this issue. We have not been doing that because we are going in for elections. They are also going in for election. Everybody is going to be in election at some point or the other. So that is not really an option at this point. The fifth is what Ronald Reagan did, what I call the Ronald Reagan approach. When he was President of the United States, he gave 2 amnesties, largely for Hispanic speakers, Mexicans largely. And about 4 million people, I think that's the number, availed of that opportunity and became citizens. How much of this is going to work, I don't know. But I am just concerned about the fact that in Assam there's a lot, and Mitra, you're there, I travel from time to time, I travel across the state, lot of confusion, lot of unhappiness, lot of stress, because people don't know how to get there. Like some people are saying, this is all the documents I have, what more can I prove? And these are people who are poor, vulnerable, and often illiterate. This is the crisis that we have, and you need to understand this better than perhaps you do now, because it's a really major human rights issue. And I say that not because I'm working in the field of human rights, I see it as somebody who's been working in this field for over 30, 40 years. And the last time we had a confrontation in Assam, 5,000 people were slaughtered. That was in 83. I don't know about you, but I do not want to see anything like that happen in Assam again.
True, it's been a very stressful period, the NRC period. And just to put it mildly, we had a session in my son's school. He's 17 years old, in Bangalore. They had a discussion on the NRC. And the children were aghast. They said, if you ask me to prove tomorrow I'm a Kannadiga, how do I do it? And it feels so odd. I'm just Kannadiga, I'm just Indian. It's so hard to prove that you're a Punjabi or a Kannadiga or a Tamil. And we don't have the documents always to prove it. We just feel we are so, we should be taken as so. It's really a stressful period.
Yes, if I may add to this. In addition, there's the fact of frequent floods and devastating floods. So even if you do have a school leaving certificate, or if you do have your birth certificate, when you are living in these very vulnerable places, very vulnerable river islands, Sor and so on, you do not have the time to take those documents with you. That is why many have been lost as well. But this exercise is based on documentation, which may not always be available due to various reasons, and ignorance, illiteracy, so many things. So I think perhaps a rethink about how we should go about this is at this point necessary, because in Assam, if you go at this point, and if you have gone for the last 6 months or 1 year, all people talk about is the NRC, and is your name there, is so-and-so's name there, and so on. And I know many people who studied, for instance, in places which are not now in Assam. They studied in Shillong, for instance, which is not now in Assam. And their fathers and parents worked in places which are not now in Assam. And they do not have any means of accessing those papers, so their names are not on this draft list.
Well, I'm not on the list. But I'm not
I am.
You are. She is too.
I am too, finally, yes. Talking of tough laws, stressful times, draconian laws, Sanjay, a little bit about AFSPA, a little bit of a reading, the way the book starts. I think that's a very emotional section.
I was on the Justice Jeevan Reddy committee that reviewed the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Many of you are here from the Armed Forces, so whether you'd agree with that report or not is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about here. I started the book with the death of Manorama. Manorama Devi, who was shot in Manipur, which triggered a major review of AFSPA. This is where it starts. It's called A Cry in the Dark, AFSPA, Manorama and Irom. As dawn crept slowly across the Manipur night, the armed men took aim at the small figure running away from them. A few short bursts of automatic gunfire, and the lone woman fell with a hopeless cry, crumpling to the cool earth below. A few days later, the sentries at the main guard to Kangla, the historic fort that was once both royal capital and spiritual center of power before the British snuffed out the independence of Manipur's kingdom before the end of the 19th century, they curiously but casually watched a group of women walking towards them. Moments afterwards, their faces were flushed with horror, embarrassment, and helplessness as they averted their gaze. For the women, several middle-aged, a few elderly, some young, most of them activists and veterans of many protests, had ripped the clothes from their bodies and stood naked, with sagging breasts and flowing hair, some thin and others heavy-hipped, before the stunned soldiers, and unfurled banners abusing the Indian Army. The Army. Indian Army, rape us, kill us, red one banner. The searing images flashed across India and the world, shaking the edifice of power and silencing even the strongest of votaries of military power, shaming, scorching, outraging. Human rights groups, civil society leaders, women and other activists called for justice for Thangjam Manorama.
About the act itself, how long it's been there, should it be there? There's been so much talk, so much debate.
Yeah, my own view is that it's exactly 60 years since the Act came into being. And if you read the discussions in Parliament, the Home Minister talked about a law and order situation that had arisen in the Naga Hills, which needed to be quelled, and this would be a temporary action. And he was warned at that time by at least one MP from Bihar and a member of Parliament from Manipur that this is a very bad precedent to set, that we are using such draconian laws against our own people. And I think that what happened was, it's been 60 years, and the army is sent there by governments, and governments have to have the political will to withdraw them. The Act is a bare Act. Many of you know it. It's in 6 sections. It's Section 4 and Section 6, which are the most, for people like me, the most problematic. Section 4 gives powers to shoot upon suspicion and cause death. And Section 6 basically protects anybody from criminal prosecution except by sanction of the central government. Till date, nobody has really received that sanction, although there have been efforts. And to understand why people have reacted to it so strongly recently, in the last 10, 15 years particularly, last 20 years, is people are saying essentially one thing. You cannot have one law for one group of people and a different law for others. And it is as much to protect the armed forces that I say that we need to do away with the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Because it's giving you a bad name. It's given the army a bad name. And the army, as the Reddy report said, and as many people we interviewed said, we need the army, but not the law. And that is a call for the politicians to take. And I'm glad to see that over the past year, the AFSPA has been taken away virtually from whatever areas it applied to in Meghalaya. It was lifted on the call of the previous state government in Tripura, and it's been now it is in the hands of the state government, not the center any longer, both for Manipur and for Assam. That they are. It is a state government which has now declared the entire state disturbed, because they're concerned about what could happen with the possible turmoil over the NRC. Now, I think this is an extremely dangerous thing. You cannot have the army on alert or standby for a completely civilian situation. And I think this is where the advice needs to go to the government, the center, and the state that this is not right. I can understand it in an insurgency situation, but the insurgency is, if not a thing of the past, one bomb blast doesn't make an insurgency. They are fatigued, and people are fatigued with them. People are fed up of them. The romance of insurgency is dead, and it died some time ago. Everybody who matters is usually in talks with the government or in detention. They're in dialogue or in detention. So that to me is an indicator that, as I kept saying at many of the hearings with people in the army and so on, civilian administration, the test of a law is its effectiveness. Now, after X number of years, would you say that the insurgency situation has fallen or has it increased? There are more groups now, but certainly the insurgency levels have fallen. So then you really don't need the act anymore. It's just to deal with specific situations at a specific time.
Mitra, a little bit on it, or do you agree with what Sanjay said?
Absolutely, basically. And I would like to say this, that because of AFSPA, what you were saying, that we need the army, I always feel as a layperson that the army, when there are floods, it's the army that rescues us. It is, but somehow the same army, for so many things, besides law and order, we need the army. But somehow this this law, when it is implemented, or even when it is there, the army, the same people, somehow we look at them with different eyes. So that is why I feel, it has to go for the benefit of both sides. There are other ways in which insurgency can be, it has come down a lot, but it can be controlled, and there are other laws as well of the land which can do that. So that's what I feel.
Do you have time to just read a very quick bit about actually this very interesting situation where there was a very senior officer in the army, his son was in the insurgency?
We do have time for a very quick reading, then we'll have to open up to question and answer. So we'll have a reading,
okay.
Yes?
So this is from Mizoram. The Indian Army brigadier stood by the recently dug grave. Two highly decomposed bodies, which had been pulled out of the pit, covered once by grass and shrubs on a hillside, lay by the open grave. The officer was in deep emotional distress, for one of the bodies was supposed to be that of his son. He was no ordinary army officer, and one of the bodies that had been exhumed was of no ordinary soldier. It was of a soldier, all right, but one who had been in the service of the very forces fighting those represented by his father. It could have been a scene out of a movie. It wasn't. It was an episode from hard-knuckle life, and the father was mourning his son. He had come from Shillong, then capital of composite Assam, in a helicopter bearing an empty coffin. Brigadier Sailu was surprised by this voice of the village chief who had approached him. As the bodies were lifted out, the village elder whispered into the army officer's ear, "This is not Sangliana. These are the bodies of Lazika and Lozingtinga. Langsil Lal Sangliana is alive." The startled father decided not to say anything because he was well aware of what his compatriots were capable of doing. But the drama was not over. The real Sangliana was not only alive but present, a short distance from the crowd, watching through thickets as his father arrived, first stoic but grieving, and then stunned and relieved before leaving. 40 years later, burly but weakened by 2 strokes, the former guerrilla fighter said he still believed in the rights of the Mizos to a separate homeland and to unite with other Mizos in Manipur, Assam, Bangladesh and Burma. This remains an imaginary land that he and others who believe in it call Zomi. Dreams don't die.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. This wonderful reading and for giving us this wonderful book. There's a lot more to it. We've talked of all the conflict and of all the difficulties and all the darkness and the mist. But there's a lot of there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of hope in the book. The sections we couldn't, like the boat clinics Sanjay has started in Assam, are very hopeful. We have someone to pass the mic around.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Firstly, you said that the army is being called out in case of calamities, and you also find them on the other side tackling the insurgency. In an efficiently working democracy and system, army shouldn't be doing either of these two things. That's one part. Secondly, coming to migration, I think it's a human phenomenon. It's not been stopped for millennia. In fact, migration is responsible for a lot of progress in humanity. Is it possible to completely eliminate migration, what you call illegal, with artificial borders? I don't think it is possible. Bangladeshi will come to India, Bihari will go to Punjab, Punjabi will go to Canada. So, whether illegally or legally. Coming to NRC, it's a political ploy. Are we in a position to jeopardize our relations with Bangladesh today? No. We have lost out on Nepal, Mauritius, Sri Lanka. The neighborhood is slowly becoming antagonistic to us. So, if there is no deportation, what is the purpose of this NRC business? Could you dwell on that?
I think it's working. I'm in complete agreement with you. We are all migrants. My father came from Sibsagar, settled in Shillong. I am based in Delhi. My daughter is somewhere else. Jahnavi grew up in different parts, and her parents are in Guwahati. She's in Bangalore. Husband and wife. So yeah, I agree with you. The artificial borders don't work. Migration is the way of the world. It's how we deal with it. And xenophobia is not the way to deal with it. I tried to address your point as far as the NRC was concerned, which is that to me it has very little meaning. If I say this in Assam, I'll probably be lynched. Lynching is, quite common these days. But to me, I want to find out what is going to happen to those people, those 15 or 20 lakh people who will come out of the list. No, I have given a suggestion, and I gave a suggestion 20 years ago, and as a member of the National Security Board, and I've given it in Bangladesh to policy people there, and I've given it to senior government people and political leaders here, which is that have work permits. The work permits should enable people to come, work for some time and go back. It would not give them any permanent settlement. No right to vote, no right to property, nothing like that. What is happening, has happened over the past 40, 50 years is that people have come, they become virtual citizens because there is no process of dealing with them. What we are seeing is a labor flow. There's no great conspiracy. It's a labor flow of people who need work and a place to stay. It so happens that place is ours,
Sanjoy, mine is a linked question. Can I just take it up?
No time for it.
On the matter of migration, exactly what you said. When Trump is doing it to families and dividing it, we can see it more clearly because it's at a distance. The Rohingyas is closer. Obviously, Assam is much closer. I'm in a dilemma. My own mind is in a dilemma. I don't have the answer to this. It's our own country and our leaders who allowed, enabled, encouraged masses of people from neighboring countries to come in for political needs. So today, when I hear all three of you talking about the register, of course you are genuine residents and you too have problems. But I'm just thinking beyond that, again at the human rights level, should we allow all those who came in X number of decades ago, they didn't happen yesterday, they're not coming in for a job from the day before, they've been there. At what point do we say, it's okay for a migrant to become a citizen? I don't know. I don't think that's the answer. I know that over the years we've all agonized about the fact that how can you have the total ethnography of a state changed by the huge amount of migration that was happening? What is the answer? I'm not sure. I'm asking.
Gitanjali is there, so I'm just getting a bit worried whether she's going to shut us up or let us ramble on for a bit. If I can just take 1 minute to not answer the question, but a minute, which is, I don't think anybody has got a straight-jacketed answer. I don't think there can be. We have to be innovative in our approaches. The work permit idea was an innovative one. It's been there in the policy domain sitting in files for 20 years, like most good things. Now they're talking about it because it's suddenly become a crisis. What do you do with these people? You can't throw them out, so give them work permits. That wasn't the idea. So we need to recognize that people will move. I covered the Golden Black Thunder operation in Amritsar in '88. In one of my books, I reported about what I found. I found an empty Bangladeshi passport in the Guru Ramdas Sarai, covered under rubble. I just picked it up. It had been issued the previous month in April in Comilla. So it was a route. So we cannot stop people. But we can you can make it either more difficult for them to come, or you can make it easier for those who genuinely want to work to come and go back. I think we need a much more open policy on these issues. Giranjali, I have something I want to read, which is, you're running short, which is how I ended the book.
Can it go into the migration session?
I think we'll...
Yeah, it can go into the migration section. We'll deal with it in the migration
run over
section.
time, run out of time. Thank you so much for being patient, and I do hope you've gone away with more questions from this session. You can talk to Sanjay later at 4 o'clock. He'll be here.
I'm so sorry about that, Sanjoy, but we'll take it up in the migration session. Thank you for a lovely, interesting discussion. The next discussion is on women's socio-religious reforms. The participants are Zakia Soman,